Cool. Okay. Yeah. This is going to be a fun episode for me actually as well, because this is the first time that I'm the host of Connecting the Dots. And yeah, today I have with me Glenn Vanderlinden, who is the founder of Human 37. And before I sort of introduce you, I just wanted to know, like, Glenn, do you want to say a few words about, yourself and maybe just to introduce yourself?
Okay, so I'm Glenn Vanderlinden. By the way, kudos on the pronunciation. You did it. You nailed it perfectly.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
I'm one of the co-founders of Human 37. We're a customer data strategy agency. I'm from Brussels, or at least the area around Brussels. My colleagues will always say I'm not from Brussels. I consider myself as being part of Brussels. When I'm not working, I like to do some reading, spend time outdoors, ride my bike, or go rock climbing.
Nice,
basically anything that doesn't tie me back to a screen. So that's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's super cool. And actually connecting to that, you do know that like one of the main points of connecting the dots is that we're trying to do, as extensive of a research as we can on the guest. And obviously I shared the questions with you ahead, so this is not gonna, be a surprise to you. But without, first jumping into the questions of business, I actually wanted to talk about something that I found that I was really impressed about and I really quite enjoyed, which was you doing recordings with your grandfather because he fought in World War II. And so what I saw was that you did a journey, and I wanted to ask sort of that, if that's okay. And so basically the story was that your grandfather rode, I think 320 kilometers altogether on a bike to basically join the army when he was 16 in the early days of World War II. And my first question was, to me, it was really honestly astounding that someone would do that at the age of 16. First of all, riding 320 kilometers on your bike, any age, is pretty impressive. But to do that at the age of 16, to join the army, to me, that was really amazing. And I just wanted to ask you, like, during the talks of your grandfather, did you find out, like, what motivated him? Why did he take on that challenge at the age of 16? Because that's not really what 16-year-olds do, usually.
Yeah. I think it doesn't have necessarily to do what motivates people. In his case, it was literally like it's the first days and weeks of the war. Nazi Germany is invading the country. You're getting overrun. And all of a sudden he came home from work and there's this letter in his mailbox saying that, well, he's 16 plus, he's male, so he needs to join the army or join the forces. Point of rendezvous was actually in the UK, so he needed to go there. It's at that point 1940, so it's not like you jump in a car and you go somewhere. The only thing those guys had was bikes, and the whole village, or at least some of his buddies, got the same letter, so they decided to just jump on the bike and make it out there. So the whole journey lasted for 2 weeks. The whole thing was he never actually made it into the army because at that time Boulogne-sur-Mer was already like blocked. He was not able
so they couldn't
make
join.
the transfer. But during that period, and it's actually about 600k, right? Because he made it back.
Yeah, he made it back as well. Jesus, yeah.
So it's a 2-week adventure, if you will, where he for the first time encountered like the horrors of war. A lot of people were fleeing. They came under attack. All of these things. And the reason why I took the interviews with my grandfather is because, well, none of these were actually documented. Even though I grew up with all of these stories. Like when I was 12 years old, we went to the Ardennes and visited museums in the holidays and stuff like that. So I grew up with all these stories. But it made sense to finally document them because I knew all of these micro stories that he told, but I never knew the entire flow of how things went. And so the objective was actually to get that recorded because at the time he was already like something like 94 or something. So it makes sense to actually get a recording of all of these stories to be able to actually as some sort of a heritage of the period, but also as part of the family heritage to get that on tape.
No, that's. I think that's such a nice initiative from your end. That's actually something that my brother did with my grandfather back in the day. So that's just super nice. And do you have like any other ideas on what to do with the recordings? So did you ever think about maybe turning them into like small books or something like that, or?
I'm actually in the process. It's very funny you mentioned it because recently I got contacted by an organization in Belgium that gathers these stories. And so one of the potential next steps would actually be to turn it into a narrative, to actually be able to have some sort of a conference where they call it Verzetscafés, which
Wow.
basically is stories of people who have family, who have stories or who lived through the war and actually
Live
share
through
those
the war, yeah.
stories and actually tell those stories to other people. So that's one of the tracks that I'm thinking of, which actually funny because a guy contacted me 2 weeks ago. So that might be one of the
Yeah.
new projects to work on over the weekends.
Wow, super exciting. Yeah, I'm really hoping that you can, build something out of this because honestly, I don't speak Dutch, so I didn't really understand the conversation. But to me, the whole idea in itself and the way you talked about it on the page that you created, I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I'm really hoping you can build something out of that. And then connecting to this, the second question is that, as I mentioned, you built basically a page that I think sort of tracked the idea of you doing the same route on bike as well 3 years ago. I think it was 2020, like summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you, like, did you actually end up doing it? And if yes, what was your experience like?
I actually did it. So based on the recordings of my grandfather, I was able to get an idea of what the main cities were that they traveled through.
Yeah.
So together with one of my friends, Jochen, who's an avid cycler, a semi-ultra racer, we actually started building that route. And we actually wrote it. The stupid thing that I did was I decided to do it on 2 days, which was more than I could handle, let's say. But I actually
Wow.
made it.
Wow.
But it was an amazing journey as well because in between that time it was the COVID periods, right? And it was
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
one of these
2020.
non-confinement periods where you could travel, and a couple of months after everything got closed up again. But it's
Yeah.
also the year where my grandfather passed away, and
Okay.
it was 80 years exactly, more or less, like 20,
Wow.
1940, 2020, between his adventure and mine. So it was a good way of commemorating him
Yeah,
and
exactly.
actually to deal with the loss as well. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was a good moment.
That must have been really nice. And did he actually know about your idea of doing the same route or
No, he never did because it's an idea
never did?
that came after he passed away. Because
Yeah.
you have to say goodbye to somebody during COVID. It's a painful period de
Yeah,
facto. You
exactly.
can't share your grief with anybody because in Belgium we actually lived in bubbles, meaning that you only had 3 to 4 people that you had contact with.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
So it was very difficult period to deal with grief, and actually as part of dealing with it, I started going through those materials, which is kind of fun as well because I can listen to stories of my grandfather now whenever I want
exactly.
because I put them online. So if I just want to, let's say, have a talk with him, if you will, I just go to SoundCloud and put
You
on the
can just
page,
go back, yeah.
and I do that stuff. But it was a good way to working through that grief and through that period and actually turn it into an adventure, which was
Right.
something de facto I'm always looking for, and actually ride my bike, which is something that I've done in that period a lot. So it was a good combination to deal with a lot of things.
Super nice. Yeah. Kudos to you, man. I mean, honestly, like, doing the same journey and then the idea in itself to like commemorate your grandfather's memory in that way and just to do something that sort of he went through as well. I think it's super nice. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. I was really interested in how you built that and what was the point. So yeah, it's super nice. Thank you. So I guess moving on to business a bit, I was going through like basically anything that I could find on you, and some of it was like the interview and the presentation that you were doing at the event. And so I heard something that you said, which was basically that when you actually studied business, and as per your recollection, you didn't really have much luck with either mathematics or statistics in the beginning. It wasn't really your forte. And yet you ended up, founding something that really uses both of those fields, a database company. So I just wanted to sort of understand what is it that motivated you to do this and what made you choose this route?
It's a fair point calling out, and I'm happy I shared it first because it's true. And university was horrible when it came to math and statistics.
Yeah.
And my main frustration with that today is that it's being taught in a very academic way. Like most
Yeah.
of the use cases or the books that you go through, they're like 15 to 20 years old. And I
Yeah.
studied business, and the statistical questions that we get or the problems that we get are still revolved around lab tests. Like
Yeah.
I'm studying business. It's not gonna. I'm never gonna end up in a lab, or I
Yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
like a radical change of career, right? And as soon as I started working in marketing, analytics, and tech in general, I figured I learned there's a lot of interesting things you can do with data, but apply to the real world. And that got me triggered. Like if I try to run three variations of the same page, very simply said, you can actually figure out which one works best and actually drive something very important, which is top line revenue, better or worse depending on the variation that you run. And so these real life examples is actually what triggered me the most as well, because all of a sudden the world became your experimentation,
Yeah.
if you will, not in the wrong way, but in the way that you could learn about things using the things that you taught in school, but applying them in the real world. And so
Yeah,
it's
like in a
still today,
practical sense.
exactly, exactly. And still today, it's one of my frustrations that like academics is very academic, and at the end, you study 5 to 6 years, and the stuff you can, at least in business, and I'm only speaking for myself, you can apply to the real world is only a fraction. So I wish that academics would like recalibrate all of the concepts that they have, which are highly interesting, but explained in a not necessarily super practical way, that they would upgrade that or apply that to the real world so people would get more exciting in the classrooms, retain more, and actually be better at retaining those concepts and applying them when they hit real life.
Yeah, no, I can really vouch for that. I honestly had a really similar experience. Like the university that I was attending here in Hungary, in Budapest, it was so similar. So I was also studying business, and then most of the books that should have taught us like actual practical business studies, like most of it was, as you said, either 50 years old, 20 years old. And honestly, in business, especially now with the speed, even something 10 years old could be a bit outdated. And
Yeah.
obviously it's good to learn the concepts, but then I rarely had classes where we would actually, let's say, read like a journal or something that was actually happening at that time, so a newspaper article or whatever, and reflect on that. I had some of those classes, but like the majority of my classes were revolving around books that revolved around ideas that were 20,
Yeah.
50, whatever years old. So
Yeah, and
that's,
don't get me
yeah.
wrong, I'm not saying everything is bad. I'm just on that
Yeah, of course,
particular
yeah.
math and statistics. It wasn't my strong point to start with, and the context didn't help. Let's say it like that.
Exactly. And so were you actually working alongside of studying, or how did you see the practical examples of data and data use cases?
I only saw them once I started working my second job. So Saasmic is
Okay.
a digital advertising agency where I
Yeah.
got exposed to the mixture of business, data, and technology. Let's say it
Yeah.
like that. And the first time I really got triggered was during the interviews, like the selection rounds, where I got the chance to be interviewed by the two founders, which were the first two people who opened up the Google office in Belgium in
Oh, okay.
2006, 2007, something like that.
Okay.
So like the old school Google way of doing things.
Yeah.
And the interviews, like they were completely different before I was at Deloitte, and they hire 80 people a year, right? Alone in consulting. So it means that they have like all these templates of doing interviews.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
While when I entered at Sametis, the thing was like I really learned a bunch during the interviews because they intellectually triggered me with all their questions.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so it's at that point that I started understanding that like, okay, I want to work with these people because there's something that excites me in the way that they push me to reflect or push me to think, that actually got me engaged further into diving into analytics and the impact it can have on your business side.
Okay, yeah, that's yeah. I really do understand that it's much more. I think it's more interesting and more intriguing in all sorts of ways when you can actually feel like, hey, this interview actually speaks to me and it's something that challenges me, rather than, hey, I feel like I'm one in 1,000, and I actually just answering the same sort of questions and same things that everyone else is, and then you don't really feel like it's in any way interested in you. It's just interested in like that task.
Yeah, and it's also one of the first moments I started realizing that it's important like who you work with, because they kind of like push you to another level. Like they always say, you're the average of the people around you, right? And I really felt like in the early days I was out of my league with the people I worked with because they thought completely differently from how I was trained and taught to think, which pushed my reflection completely differently and kind of like made me evolve in the direction I evolve today.
Right, that's super nice. So one of the things that triggered you was basically the interview process, and that just made you realize, oh, actually, we can do it this way as well, and this is much more interesting. But then was there anything else? Because based on what you're saying, your university didn't really trigger you that way. So was it maybe your family side or something, you know, from your childhood that influenced you to actually pursue something in that direction?
Honestly, it's a very hard question to answer because I don't know. When I
Okay,
came
yeah,
from
yeah,
university, I joined Deloitte, which is like I did it because I didn't really know what else to do, right? The fact that
yeah,
you study economics, the joke is like you study economics because you have no idea of what you really
yeah,
want to do, so you
yeah,
study
yeah.
economics. And then you go to Deloitte, kind of the same story because it's the obvious choice to make. But I
Exactly.
realized while I was there that it wasn't working for me. And so I just started like exploring other things. And like originally I thought about advertising, but more the creative side because I
Yeah,
lacked something a bit more creative and a bit more less maybe structured and processed, which is very funny if you think of it these days, today.
yeah,
Um, but that triggered me to just like go out on interviews and have interview rounds with people. And after a while, I realized that the people who trigger you were actually the most interesting. So you go do these interviews, and after a while, you come across an interview that after a couple of days, you're still thinking about it. About it was interesting, it's triggering, the people seemed interesting, they seemed to think differently, they challenged me, I learned something. And for me, that was a good sign to just like gut feeling, like pursue it. It
yeah.
took a bit of conversations with my family, obviously. Like the question is always like, why would you leave like a job in a company with a good
A
reputation
secure
that has
job.
a
Yeah,
track
yeah,
record? And the ladder is very clear. You're going from here to there in 5 steps, and like you're joining this small company. Like it's a risk, all of these things. But I'm very happy that I followed that instinct and that gut feeling of like being triggered by people and understanding or trying to understand what would make me tick.
yeah.
And that's what I did at that point. And it for me, it still paid off, and it's one of the best moves I've done in my life so far.
Yeah, exactly. I actually meant to say, like, you know, someone who would take on a challenge of biking 320 kilometers, actually more than 600, you know, all the way. And then just the idea of like recording stories from your grandfather, it really doesn't sound to me like the type of person who wants to sit in Deloitte 12 hours a day and just do like, you know, accounting and whatever it is, you know, like just spreadsheets and stuff. So I think you definitely made the right choice there based on, you know, how you carry yourself.
Yeah, and one note on that, I don't consider it like because a lot of people think that I think that Deloitte is I don't learn or you don't learn anything there. I don't believe that.
No,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
believe you learn a bunch of things there. I've learned a ton,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
I've also learned what didn't work for me. And I've met incredible
exactly.
people. I had good managers, I had good project managers, people I that learned me a lot, but it just wasn't working for me over time. And that's what I learned. I also learned that a specific piece of culture or a specific culture didn't work for me. So I
Exactly.
went looking or exploring for another type of culture that would work for me.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think, you know, when people try to like measure corporate against like startups or whatever, you can't really do that because as you say, it really depends on like the sort of person you are. So maybe someone can learn a lot more from a huge corporate setting and then other people feel a bit too like in a box there. But then maybe, you know, in a startup setting, other people would feel like, oh, it's just, you know, too many routes, whatever. I don't actually know what I want to focus on. So I think, as you said, it really depends on the type of person as well. Um, So you started your data analytics journey or sort of like your journey with data, you know, at this point, I think 10 years ago. And I feel like obviously analytics and anything related to data has surely changed a lot since, you know, the early days. I think it sort of had like a huge upward track. So for a lot of years, people, anyone you talk to in the business realm or, you know, in marketing or whatever, everyone was just talking about data driven, still up to this day, sort of. But then lately there may have been some setbacks with like, you know, all of the new regulations on what can you track and stuff like that. And I just wanted to get your perspective on what do you think business leaders need to understand today about data analytics or how to approach data?
It's a very broad, very difficult question.
Yeah,
So I'll try to answer it as top of mind as I can. I think the main thing that we see with organizations, and especially when you say business leaders, right? It's typically like a top-down thing and the word data-driven drops, like we need to be data-driven, is that a lot of organizations see data as the silver bullet that kind of will self-explanatory, tell them what to do and solve all of their problems. It's absolutely not the case. It's kind of like a raw material that you decide to gather in your organization, but you still need to work it and figure out what to do with it. And it requires a lot of skill. And by skill, I don't just mean the engineering side or the analytics side or understanding how to transform data. It's also about like, what am I actually going to do with it, and turning business questions into things that can be found in data, right? Because usually business leaders will have these big, opaque or vague questions. And the objective of somebody, or at least it's my understanding or interpretation, is that people in analytics should help to break out these very big questions into hypotheses that are small enough to tie with data points and try to solve them, each of them, and then compile it into a big answer to show a direction towards the company. One of the things I'm convinced of as well is that a lot of organizations are gathering data for the sake of gathering data. They believe that, well, we'll just gather it and we'll figure it out later. There's a huge impact of doing that. You mentioned privacy. Like, it's not a good idea to hoard data if you don't need it, because you're exposing yourself into a lot of risk, and you're probably breaking quite a bit of rules while doing that. It has a huge cost to it as well. But it's one of these things we still see happening, right? And in the end, data is absolutely worthless unless you're doing something that drives your business forward. And that could be many things. It could be building a better campaign. It could be building better customer support. It could be personalizing all of the touch points a customer has. Like, the way we think about customer data specifically in the world we live, because we focus mostly on customer data, is we want to make sure that the data of the customer works for the customer. And if that is the case, it means that the customer has a better experience, that things work better in the context for that customer, and as a result, the business will thrive. And so that's the context where we're looking at data from, which makes it kind of challenging. Because a lot of business leaders see like, okay, we need to do something with data, and data is a patch for all of our problems, and we're going to do this data project, and our problems will be behind us, and then we'll just go along with whatever we're doing.
And then, so touching on that, that's actually something that I was really interested in, because I feel like even with something like marketing services, sometimes it can be a bit difficult or challenging to sort of, have a business leader buy into the idea of, okay, we should be doing this because it actually makes sense, but then it has complexity to it. So as you said, it's not just like, okay, we do this and then it solves everything, but we sort of do this, then we build it out, whatever. But then if it comes to like data, that's something that probably is even less understandable to the layman, compared to marketing even. So like, what sort of tactics did you develop, or like, what was your approach to having business leaders understand something that's so complex, but at the same time you have to break it down to, something more digestible, of like understanding, okay, why do you need this and why would it make sense to do this for you?
I think there's like two use cases I can relate on. Like, typically, if the business leader decides they need to do something with data, then we need to help to define what that thing is that they want to do, and basically we call it like define user stories. Okay. Because they have very broad questions like, I wanna use data to optimize this. But the question is like, what do you really want to do? As a marketeer, I would like to understand where people get stuck in a funnel so I can make better iterations of my funnel steps. That's kind of like how we break it down, and then we work on that user story and we quantify it, we try to solve it, and then we show the impact to the business leader so they understand how to formulate questions properly so they can be built and have impact. On the other hand, what you see is that people in the organization at, let's say, mid-levels are interested and have a very good idea of what they want to do with data, but then business leaders or top-level management isn't entirely sure on what the impact would be, or it's vague, or they don't understand, right? And at that point, you flip it. We start with using a user story, and we show the impact of a single user story and bring that up so management kind of understands like, okay, this is a very concrete use case. We've used data in order to get that finding, to then use that finding to build hypothesis, to roll out the different approaches that we have around making improvements to that hypothesis or on top of that KPI, and actually serve impact. And as a result, you can start building what we call like a user story catalog of all types of like things you can do with data, but are very concrete, use case driven. So it actually drives either impact in your organization bottom up, or helping organizations define them top down.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's super clear. So basically, instead of like sort of introducing the whole idea to them and just talking about, yeah, this is what it can do, you try to find what they are looking for. So what is the question that you want to be solving? What is the issue that you're now facing? And then a specific solution that you're providing to that is like, okay, we can actually fix that with this and this solution, instead of like trying to, just I don't know, apply like a holistic, like, okay, we're solving everything right now. It's just like, okay, what is this specific use case that is bothering you right now? We can actually do this and this on that. And then you can show the impact of it. And then you can move on to like new projects, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole concept of like how do you eat an elephant, where the elephant represents like a large business challenge, and
Yeah.
the answer is you cut it up in pieces, and the user
Yeah.
stories are kind of the pieces on how you tackle eating the elephant.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's super nice. So sort of reflecting on your background and your career steps, you already mentioned, your days at Deloitte. You sort of touched upon the 70s days with like the digital marketing and stuff. And then you started something of your own. So I just wanted to know, like, were there any moments or like pivotal phases in those journey stops, or like the different career steps that sort of have significant impact on your understanding of data-driven marketing, and then like what basically led you to then developing Human 37. So like, okay, you did digital marketing at 70s, you did the Deloitte years. So what was that helped shape you this idea of like, okay, I actually want to move this way?
I think it's a number of things, and most of the shaping will have taken place at my 70s days. The environment we were in was very like intrapreneurial, in the sense that there was a lot of liberty, ideas could flow, you could do a bunch of things. And at the same time, you saw that the landscape was changing. And I'm talking about the years, let's say 2018 going forward. Technically speaking, digital marketing was becoming more complex, in the sense that there were way more regulations, marketers needed to become way more technical. Data took a bigger role, the cloud and data warehousing was picking up, and budgets were opening up for marketing license tech or MarTech in general, where previously everybody was on Universal Analytics, which cost them nothing, and that was their tool stack together with GTM, right? Together with that, there's a couple of things that happened. One being the whole pressure on third-party cookies being deprecated, the need for first-party data. A lot of things were like, a lot of buzzwords being dropped, nobody really understanding what was going on. And we were sitting at the time in the middle of everything that was happening, because we worked with like probably 20 clients. And you could see what was happening, but you could also see that people were not having the appropriate support to get that work done, or understand the whole challenge that was facing, or that they were facing. And so at that point, it kind of became clear that market was going to open up, customer data as such. We've been taught to think critically and be entrepreneurial all along. Plus, at that time, with the co-founders, I now founded Human 37. We were already in senior positions in an agency that was sold off to a big group. So you knew you were kind of at the end of your ladder, if you will. So the question was like, okay, what do we do next? Because we were all wearing these marketing or media hats, which made it very hard to pivot into a very technical job or a data consultancy job. Also, a consultancy model and a media agency don't necessarily work out, or aren't always complementary from a P&L sheet point of view. It's two types of businesses. So at that point, we decided to take the leap. I mean, like, none of us had children at the time. It was the only risk we were taking was like a couple of thousands of euros in the bank, and our time, potentially like 2 years of our professional career, where in the meantime, even if it would not work out, we would learn a ton. And so that's the leap that we took at that moment.
That's actually super nice. I mean, when would you do something like this? If not when you already feel like, okay, I have some of the experiences I can use to build something like this, and I'm not yet a father, or not yet someone who can't really just risk it all. So I think taking a big leap at that moment is pretty much the perfect spot where you can do that. And then were there any valuable lessons that you could carry over from your previous jobs to like how you set up the company? So, that could help whatever the approach or the mission that Human 37 had, because I understand that basically those experiences of like, okay, the data realm is changing, whatever, like as you said, the third party cookies and data is actually going to have some different regulations now. So I understand that motivated you in going this way, but was there something that you could take over in like shaping the company on how to build it up?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie in the sense that we didn't reinvent the wheel entirely. There's a lot of stuff that we learned because we were in like management positions in the previous job, so you try a lot of things, right? And the things that work, you bring them along with you and you adapt them to the new context, and you start adding things on top of that that make your culture the culture you have. So you don't necessarily reinvent the wheel, you reuse what you have. And back in the days, our organization, our previous job was focused a lot on processes, because processes means that things are scalable. The thing we wanted to make sure is that we have some sort of a golden standard of the quality that we deliver as Human 37, which basically means that I need to be able to make a project delivered by Vincent as good as a project delivered by myself or by Julian or by any other team member of Human 37, right? Because you want people to understand that what we're trying to deliver is the highest standard in quality, and it doesn't necessarily is tied to people individually. So it means you start looking into processes. How can we onboard people efficiently? What are the things that they need to understand in order to be able to do their work? What are the cultural values that we have that need to be transferred or transposed into everything that we do, which makes the work that we do recognizable by everybody? And it's these type of things. So in the beginning, we were very focused on getting processes set up, understanding what made something successful, analyzing that, and then deriving all of the milestones and the best practices from that, and almost like turning it into a process, if you will, or a playbook to understand, okay, the next
Right.
time we do this project, we need to make sure that we take this into account, we're going to attack it this way, we're going to approach it that way, etc., etc., etc. So everything that we were kind of like brainwashed around processes by the time we left Sametis,
Yeah.
which I guess was a good thing, because everything we took into Human 37 from that was around processes. So still today we're very busy, or we have like weekly management catch-ups, and a lot of them are on like, where are we in this process? Where are we doing that? And everything is kind of like a playbook, because it also means that you know that it's not tied to a person. The quality depends on the process and not necessarily on the fact that I have a bad day or a good day. Obviously there's margin. But the fact that I have something to relate to and to hold on to means that I'm able to deliver at very high standards of quality, regardless of who is delivering the project or when I'm delivering the project.
Yeah, that's a lovely point actually, because I often feel like what some of these smaller agencies and just basically startups are lacking is exactly what you're saying, like sort of the process, like the structurized, systematized way of doing things. Because obviously I think anyone who either comes from a corporate setting or doesn't even have a corporate background, but just feels like, oh yeah, that the issue with those guys is that they have all of these processes and everything is just so formalized, which can be a bit of bit of an annoyance sometimes, but at the same time it actually makes sense, and maybe you don't want to have that sort of hierarchy built out. But as you said, without the right structure and without like like an actual process drawn out, even if you're the best marketer, you're the best data analytics guy, whatever, it's not going to burst as much, because basically you just don't have in front of you the tracks or the steps that you should be taking. So I think that's such a really good point if you can bring that over. Yeah
and the key word is also pragmatism, right? It's not about over engineering processes, it's about pragmatic things. One of the examples we have is we have what we call hive minds. Hive mind sessions are like somebody delivers a project, learns a bunch of new things. From that, they will shoot an invite to everybody, which is a call or a physical thing. They will send some prep work that needs to be read, and there's a 30-minute like hive mind session where they go over what has been delivered, why it makes sense to deliver the way that they delivered. The whole team learns, and from there, all the processes are adapted to be able to take that into account. The whole idea is that if somebody learns something new, everybody learns it, right? So that's the whole aspect of that, and it's a very pragmatic way. It's just somebody shoots an invite, and then everybody knows that it's a hive mind and what that means because it's part of our culture. And then from there, things work themselves out.
Yeah, that's actually super smart. And then connecting to that, I didn't really have this written down before, but do you feel like, or do you see any sort of challenge keeping that in the long run when you guys are growing and maybe more people are getting onboarded? Like, do you guys have plans on how to keep that nice structure and like the hive mind and all of those meetings if you're, whatever, 5 more people, 10 more people?
Yeah, the thing is, like, when you start a company or when you're in a management position, let's say, in another organization or something, the tendency is always to organize things top down and to say, like, management thinks we need to do that, or founders think we need to do that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to organize those things themselves.
Oh, nice.
We have the team working with us and actually delivering like a massive chunk of the work. And then the remark is often like, this was an impressive delivery. Like, it's something that we learned. I mean, can you make sure you share that with the team in a hive mind? And then it's his responsibility to make sure that that happens. And you see that over time, people start doing that out of themselves, like naturally, which means that you're able to transfer part of that idea and it's being absorbed in the culture. So next time Diogo or Loic delivers something, their reflex will be to organize a hive mind or at least to share something with the team around that so everybody knows. Yeah. Because we're basically in the business of knowledge, if you will. I don't know how to say it differently. Yeah. Or to figure things out. That's kind of more the business we're in. And so knowledge is what we cherish. And the idea is that if somebody figures one thing out that's fundamentally new, then their objective should be to share it with the team as efficiently and as fast as possible. And that's becoming more and more part of our culture, which is one of these tiny things that means that we're building for a scale through culture, which I think is a very important thing. And that happens by involving the team.
Yeah, that's I really love that. And then I even think that, if it's so ingrained in your culture, which is super nice, even if you guys would triple in size, I guess you could still do it in like, smaller bunches, maybe just like a smaller group sharing the learnings and all of that. So I think it's something that I think a lot of established companies strive to be able to just have something ingrained in their sort of DNA, like business DNA, and just have something that people actually like to do and people are accustomed to do. So I think that's a super nice approach. So I think anyone listening to this, I definitely do, but I think anyone listening to this would get the feeling that, wow, all you do is like success. Like, with the Deloitte years and then moving to Cementis, basically people who, as you said, studied the first Google office there. And then, the own company with all of these nice structures. But I think, at the same time, success rarely comes from consistently winning. So I just want to know, like, were there any outstanding fuck-ups that when you look back on, you think, oh, this actually really helped my career, coming up to the point where you are?
But it's not that it's all success. I think that it's being consistent. That's the most thing. And a lot of luck. Even though some of the people that you had as mentors would say like you engineer luck, and part of that is true, but you still need it a bit. In terms of fuck-ups, there definitely have been. The thing I'm thinking of mostly is if I come back to Deloitte is like, it's not a fuck-up, but it's also about understanding that you made a choice that doesn't work for you. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a fuck-up, even though that they might say that the work I've done at the end wasn't necessarily the best anymore. Yeah. And definitely there have been meetings where you enter and you're like, you messed up, or you came with the wrong assumptions, or you did things wrong, or you broke a setup, or those type of things. But I think it's mostly about like learning from those things consistently and having the permanent reflection on what could I have done better. And so far it worked, because instead of like making all of these things that don't work pile up into a huge pile, which creates this massive fuck up, you actually are able to scoop them out of your next iteration and actually end up with consistent smaller fuck-ups, which means that it's less impactful and you get consistency in your quality over time. There's not like a massive thing that comes up. Yeah, obviously we've all deployed like something you should not have deployed on a Friday to figure out that on Monday everything was broken over the weekend. These type of things, right? So again, that's part of the process. We don't go live on Fridays. Very simple things because you want to avoid that. So you can incorporate it in the process to make sure that the consistency of the quality you can deliver is there. You have a consistent quality, and you can make sure that you work on upgrading that quality. So the standard you deliver just goes up and up and up by making sure that you have a reflection on what could I have done better with this delivery, and making sure that you don't do that again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach. And what sort of reminds me of is like, if someone is building a sports career and someone is trying to be an athlete, you can't really base your future decisions on, was this one workout or training session shit? Because it might have been shit, you might have fucked up something, but actually what you learned about it is that, okay, even if you don't learn like, a major lesson out of all of your fuck ups, but as you said, that's why I like that you said consistency. Because, sometimes maybe a fuck up is not like a major learning, but it also just helps you understand that, I will have these days. I will have, some of these, like downs, but there's always like an upward trajectory if consistently you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that's.
I like the analogy of the sports athlete. It's actually true. It's kind of when you're training for a marathon, because that's what you're doing when you build a company, right? And it's about all of these like runs you do like every week. And there's not one run that is particularly changing your performance, but it's the consistency of understanding things, like how nutrition works, how all of these additional factors and sleep work. It's a good analogy. It kind of relates to that. It's actually the same thing.
Yeah, and that's why I love that you said consistency, because I think often people. And I think it's understandable that if someone is like a super experienced person in business, they tend to have these major ideas like, I did that and that made me learn this. But I think sometimes maybe it's not like a major learning. And as you said, it's rather just the fact of like, I just keep going. Like, I did something, maybe that wasn't that good, but then I just keep going and it's going to get better and better with time. That's a super nice way of saying that. So I think we already sort of touched up on this. So I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you wanted to add to this, because when you were working at Semitis, you were sort of like in between the crossroads of technology and marketing. And I just wanted to, get like an understanding of, do you feel like these experiences have shaped your perspective on how to have like a symbiotic relationship between tech and marketing? So how do you build that up?
Yeah, in those days, it was a lot about marketing and tech. I think today at Human 37, it's more about business and data. Yeah. And tech lives somewhere in between, because tech is just an enabler, right? Like most of the use cases you try to solve can be solved through a CDP or a data warehouse setup, right? There's a million paths to get to the same destination. It's just a question of what you like or what you prefer in context. So today our objective, our focus is always around business. Like, what do you want to achieve? Where do you want to get? Because most of the background of the people we have in the organization is actually business, and then they moved into tech or engineering or data. It's rare that we have profiles that actually come from engineering pure and then move into business. Because our objective is actually to drive impact through data, and we use technology for that, right? Marketing is still in there for the simple reason that marketing use cases are often the easiest to activate, for the simple reason that you don't need much stakeholders within the organization. I mean, like, if you need to upgrade experiences or impact business KPIs through better support systems, you need to start wiring into the core of the business and doing all of these things. It takes a million stakeholders, IT, etc. While in a lot of cases, marketing, the use cases are around media optimization or about personalization, which in a lot of cases happens outside of the walls of the business, which means we can immediately drive value from there. And like I said earlier, like if you drive value from those use cases, you get the buy-in to do it on other use cases that require more stakeholders. So that's where it grows. So I would say today the core at Human 37 is we focus on business. We use data in order to drive business forward through personalization, through removing friction, through insights, through segmentation, wherever you can think of. Marketing is one field of application, and tech is an enabler to get there.
Nice. So then you could sort of say that marketing is usually sort of like the Trojan horse, or like the first step that you can take to infiltrate a company, and then you can build on that, because marketing use cases are easier for you guys to implement and less stakeholders involved.
That's actually a nice way of putting it. I'm gonna write that down.
Okay, yeah. The Trojan horse, yeah. what I really liked, or what was actually interesting to me, and I was quite intrigued by it, is that you guys call a data agency Human 37. And to me, it suggests that there must be like a strong human element. And you sort of already touched upon that. Like a lot of people actually come from business and they are not specifically engineers. They actually move towards that route. And I just want to get a feeling of like, do you have a story, for instance, that helps us understand, the human side of data, or like how it has a significant difference in a campaign or strategy?
Yeah, but more the other way around.
Okay.
Uh, the thing is with data is it's a bunch of data points, if you will. It's atoms, and you can ask a machine to do something with that, but usually the machine lacks a lot of context, right? And without that context, like decision making is very hard, or they will make assumptions that are not relevant. And we had one client who had like this very elaborate tracking plan, and they were consistently doing analysis on what paywall. So they had about like I think 10 paywalls on their product. What paywall was clicked the most, and which one drive most traffic, etc. And so they were looking into it in their analytics tool, and they asked us like, yeah, we want to revise the setup, etc., etc. So we basically audited the whole system, and they showed us a couple of analyses, and they said like, yeah, but X% of our users engage with this type of paywall, therefore it is the best, because that's what the data is saying. Right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
only those data points that you get without zero context. And then we started looking into the product, and we figured that actually they were consistently tracking 9 of the paywalls and not 10, which meant that all of the conclusions that they were having were completely falsified, because they were only doing it on 90% of their paywalls and not on 100% of the paywalls. And so we added that one paywall as a data element, and all of the results got skewed. So it's one of these things where they were relying on data and kind of forgetting that they needed to check the context and take a step back and figuring out what does this mean. It's not because only that data is available in the platform that it's the only way that the user can actually do something. And that's where the strategy of a human is important, to kind of set that up, the strategy. What are we going to track? What are we going to do? How are we going to measure? And on the other side, if you look at data, have the reflection on what's the context in which this happens. I'm not sure if it kind of relates, but it kind of, to me, points to the fact that humans still play a very important role in assessing what's going on in the bigger picture and be critical towards the conclusions that are being drawn purely on data.
Yeah. No, I do think that's a really important point, because honestly, I see that a lot with marketing as well. And obviously, like, if anyone is on LinkedIn and is following any marketers, you would definitely see, for example, Chris Walker always talking about like attribution, like on the, the high level. If you just look at data points, it may tell a completely different story than what's actually happening. Exactly. Because maybe you're not seeing, what's behind. Like people are actually sharing stuff that you can't track. People might be making the decision to click on that paywall because that's more in front of them, or because that's the time, they scroll down, whatever, they see that. So it's like, just, if you just rely on data, you might have a really different picture if you don't include like the human side of it. Like, okay, what actually made them do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of these things. Like, we used to do this question in the interview rounds before, when I was at the marketing agency, where you would see this drop in this graph, and then candidates needed to hypothesize like what was going on. And it was actually a graph where sales for a particular part of or a particular shoe, I believe, and the thing was sales dropped to 0. And actually what happened was that not that the campaign was underperforming, the product was simply out of stock. And these are things that humans can come up with and make decisions with, meaning like, let's stop spending money because we're still racking up clicks. But that data as such would assume like, okay, this product is not working anymore. But these are external factors that you need to take into account, and we're like, a human brain is handy to come in and make conclusions.
Yeah. And sort of touching up on that, do you feel like with, the inevitable rise of AI and like, all of the new AI solutions and all of that, how do you see that impacting, your work and whatever data analytics as a whole in the future?
I think it's a very interesting field, especially in analytics. It's going to be a paradox versus what I just said, right?
Yeah.
Because it outsources a lot of the skills you need and the time you need in order to make an analysis to potentially AI, right? Loads of platforms, Amplitude, Mixpanel, GA, like all of these analytics tools and platforms, they have these AI assistants where you just type in a question and their engine will like rack up all of the data and do stuff. For me, it's a win, but you need to be critical. You need to have that layer of, you need to have a proper understanding of the business, where the data comes from, where it is collected, how it is collected. Like forms submitted, for instance. A lot of clients track forms submitted, not when the form is actually successfully submitted, but when the button is pushed, right?
Yeah.
And if 50% of the time a field is not set and things go wrong, your data is completely skewed. You need to know those things because an AI will not know it. And you will see these analyses, and you need to be able to get that first response that you get from that AI engine. This is the analysis, this is the question that you've asked, but you need to be able to filter down with the context that you as a human or an architect in that case, because you've set it up or you're the analyst, to be able to drill down and get proper context and understanding of what you're actually looking at based on what you know. So I see it more today as a co-pilot to do some quick validation or to get some first level of how would I tackle this, and then get suggestions, which is actually how a lot of people use ChatGPT, right? Like they have no clue on how to start with something, and then they ask the machine, and the machine comes back with a response, and they use it as inspiration in order to move forward and actually do their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then I sort of also wanted to ask, like, have you guys actually implemented any of these tools already? Because as a marketer, it's funny because I'm not going to say that I don't have any fear about, like, maybe not now, but maybe in 5 years, some of these jobs will be actually just exchanged, and not necessarily because AI is going to do such a great job, but just because I think in many cases, if you look at, from the perspective of like a business leader, what they're looking at is ROI. And if they can, somehow convince themselves that the AI is good enough and it can actually do a good enough job, then maybe they're just going to feel like, why would I pay for this human, if it can be done. But we already sort of use it. And as you said, I also see it as like a co-pilot. I don't necessarily see it as, okay, this is something that can exchange me. I see it as, okay, this actually is a tool that I can use, and a tool that can make me better at what I do already. So like, do you guys already implement some of these stuffs?
Yeah, I think a lot of the implementations we do use it in a very specific way. Like, I mean, a lot of marketing use cases revolve around personalization.
Yeah.
I always take the story when my grandmother used to go to the store, like the small store on the corner of the street, operated by an independent. You would come in on Friday, and that person knows it's Friday, and they would say like, it's Friday. Do you want your usual?
Yeah.
It's kind of personalization in a non-digital setting, right? Probably like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But today we still know that personalization kind of works, but it's very hard to personalize for thousands of people in that way. And so you still need the additional layer, or we use that additional layer of AI or recommendation engines or personalization, whatever you want to call it, in order to be able to make those slight variations for everybody, so it makes it work more for them, or it reduces the friction for them. So those are cases where we absolutely apply it, especially in the field of marketing. The way I look at it is AI is going to be an extension of automation today. Like all of the boring jobs that we try to automate, it's going to do it for us. And it's going to make our job more interesting, kind of like everything that happened in evolution, right? The way we constructed buildings like 50 years ago is fundamentally different, and the people who did it like do different things now. So maybe I'm naive in that. I'm not saying it would replace it, time will tell.
Yeah.
But at least it's going to push us to evolve, to be more advanced in what we're doing, because we're no longer stuck in doing that 90% of the time job that is repetitive and that we actually don't like and all that stuff. And instead it's going to be 10% of validation. So we'll still be there to validate and to make sure that all of these things that we're doing make sense. And we're going to move on to doing more exciting and more interesting stuff in our lives, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really positive way of looking at it, and that's how I tend to look at it as well. But yeah, I do. Maybe it's naivety, but I also think that it's not necessarily something that's gonna completely just destroy your job or be a complete whatever, like an alternative instead of a human. It's more like if you can use it right, it can actually make your life just a bit easier. It's funny because I think some people, it feels similar to the idea of like, when you have these no-code pages that you can set up now, obviously for years now, and like you still see a lot of developers or engineers that want to start from scratch and build everything from scratch, just because of like they feel it's more of a pride thing, I think. And it's also, I think it's similar with AI, that some people feel like, oh, if I use it to like help my work, it's sort of like cheating, whereas I think you can actually implement it in smart ways.
Yeah, one thing that I'm a bit concerned of though, is that like I hope people still will remain critical and be cautious and use their own brains. That's the most important thing we have, right? Our minds and our brains, and that they actually use everything that AI can generate as an input, but then form their own opinion about it. I think that's the most important part, and that's the best way it can help us, because it's an additional stream of information that comes in, but it needs to be filtered, because it's going to be coming in at such a high rate and at such a high volume that if we don't do that, like the impact of being biased on something, like you need less time to be biased, because the volume of AI generated content or input that you get from machines is going to be so high, so fast, and so much in volume that could be a risk over time. But time will tell, I guess.
Time will tell, exactly. So a bit going back to the early days of Human 37, that's definitely when you guys didn't use AI. I just want to get sort of like an understanding of what was I think it's always a bit of a reductionist question, but at the same time it could be interesting, like how did your first sort of 100 days look like? So what was the beginning and how you approached, building up from scratch?
The first 100 days were actually, they flew by. The thing is, we're 4 founders, so it's a lot. 4 founders, but it's also, in our case, I think an advantage. We've been working together for 8 years, so we kind of know everyone's strength and weakness, which means that you basically can divide up all the tasks between the 4 of us, and we just use a moment to sync. So the first 100 days were mostly not necessarily about building the team, because, well, first what you need is enough work to keep 4 people busy, right? So the focus is on quality. Winning those first projects, making sure that you deliver at the high quality, that people are happy, that the standard you're reaching is also the one you want to reach. So challenging yourself constantly, immediately going into that feedback loop of what could be better, and writing down those processes and playbooks and those learnings, which indirectly is actually preparing for a team to be built, right? In the early days, I remember I was doing a lot of the analytics implementations, but the objective was not for me to be the only one being able to do that. I was focusing on that as one of the 4 founders. That was my core focus. But I needed to make sure that the people who were joining those projects were able to get that stuff done at the same level of quality. So it's a lot, again, it sounds boring, but it's a lot about focus. It's a lot about pragmatism. It's a lot about developing processes and making sure that you just get the work done properly at a very high quality standard. Because the thing I believe in is that there's no follow-up or there's no growth if the quality you deliver is shit. So you have 0 follow-up conversations on next projects if the work you're delivering is not good or mediocre or average. So it needs to be good, it needs to be excellent. And so that's the focus that we've always had, to make sure that the work we deliver is excellent. So we as a business can grow, because if we grow as a business, that's when we can start building a team, when you start with 4 founders, right? So that's been like the first 100 days. And we actually use that concept of 100 days now in sprints. So our company is organized in 100-day sprints.
Nice.
Which is a bit weird, because yes, we have quarters and stuff, but it's more of it's not a gimmick, because we have entire sprint logs built around that. What are we going to focus in the next 100 days? Where do we want to end at the end of the sprint? Where we want to be as an organization? Where do we want people in the organization to be at the end of 100 days? And every day is 1%. So it means that every day you put in 1%. So if you had a good day, great, you've contributed 1%. If you had an off day, well, it's only 1%. But it's kind of like this consistency and incrementality of progress that we're trying to build in the organization, in the culture. And it all started with those 100 days, I guess.
With the first. It's actually fun because you've gone back to consistency multiple times now. When we talked about the fuck ups, and now when we talked about the building it out and how you do the 100-day sprints as well. And I actually really like that concept, because again, you had it at one point, you said it actually might sound boring, because people I think often want to hear these stories about how we built it, and then obviously it's nice to have like a story behind it, and it's always fun if you can say, oh yeah, we started in a garage and then something major thing happened and whatever. And I think in rare cases that does happen, but unless you're among the really few people who build whatever Facebook, Google or any of these, or ChatGPT. building something that you guys are building mostly just depends on like, are you actually doing the work you're supposed to be doing? Are you doing it consistently enough? And is there actually sort of like a structure that you can follow? So I think that's, even though it might not sound as glamorous in the beginning or might not sound as exciting, I think that's a really valid point of like, and I really love the 100-day sprint as well, because as you said, it's like 1% each day. Did you actually manage to do that 1% today? You know, if yes, that's good because we're 1% better. If not, that's still not a huge problem because we still have all of those percentages to build on it.
Exactly.
So that's super smart.
I don't want to sound too boring, but I feel like that's the majority of the thing that we're focused on, which means that we are today where we are today. Obviously, there are some like weird stories in the first 100 days where we get kicked out of offices because we're like, we have friends working in an office, but we don't pay for a license. So all of a sudden we show up, we work there 2 hours, we get thrown out. Like all these things, they happen, right? Where you need to work in coffee bars. All of these type of things happen when you're early in a business, but it makes good stories.
Yeah.
But it's not, I think, what defined us or what shaped us. It's like cool adventures along the way, but they're not necessarily critical to the success.
Exactly. And then connecting to the idea of what I also like is, and I think that's pretty much the best way to build a company, is to build with people that you've been working for 8 years together, because who else would you build it with? Were there any sort of quick wins in the beginning? I mean, I'm sure there were, that you could then build upon. So what were the things that you guys could do quite quickly in the beginning?
Well, the thing is, we had a good network when we started, especially because you're 4. So you know a lot of people in the industry. So I mean, tech partners, people who are dealing with difficult problems that you're going to be focusing on. We had a good network when it came to clients or people we could talk to and pitch ideas to. We were lucky to have people who kind of mentored us along the way, like friends, families, and fools, you know, triple F, that were willing to spend a bit of time with us up front to validate a couple of ideas and to talk with about what we were going to do, and told us like, don't do this, try this, or be careful with that, be aware of this, those type of things. Which meant that the day we went live, we actually could reach out to a lot of people, and they were also excited for us, which is really something that gives you a lot of energy, right?
Yeah.
There's 4 guys coming out of a company, they start their own thing, and people were excited for us, which is something that gives you a lot of energy. Plus the fact that we've been working together for a long time, it means that you exactly know what to focus on. I know that if there's an email coming in and it's about this topic, I almost don't have to look at it. I know that Julian's going to pick up on it. I almost know what he's going to say. And I know that these dates, I probably need to keep them open because it's about something technical. So he'll invite me in there. The thing that you get, though, on the other hand, is that you're so closely working together, and you're kind of like a football team that's been playing together, you know where the ball's going to be played and where you need to run, all of those things. But it also kind of creates, or this risk of creating an echo chamber where you don't ask yourself too much questions. And so that's one of the things that since day one we've been very wary about. And we try to look for people that we trust to try and challenge us and pass idea along. Because if you're closely working together for a long time and things work that way, you risk of having the same ideas too often. It also means that you can get blind spots. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get out of those bubbles often enough and talk to different people. So we maintain our own networks. We talk to people that each of us considers their mentor, all of these type of things, to make sure that we have ideas from other people that we can bring to the rest of the team and like validate them and brainstorm about them and think out loud about things that we might just agree on when we're 4. That's something that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to be able to just involve some outside, some external ideas and just some outside eyes, really, because as you said, even if you have the best intentions and, you know, everyone is smart in their own perspective, but even then you can sort of get into this feedback loop of like, oh yeah, that's a good idea as well. I also thought about that. And then, yeah, you can get a bit boxed up after a while. I think that's a nice approach. So what I've seen is that even in its first year, Human 37 had, you know, like successful projects, and I think across different countries as well, so not just in one country. So I was really interested in what were the strategies or approaches that you have been able to employ to drive demand for the recognition for Human 37 in a short span.
I think that it's working on specific problems people have around the world. Everybody's struggling with customer data. Everybody's tackling with challenges in their own way, but they're kind of universal. And if you can narrow them down and position on that and communicate about that, it draws people in. I think the number one thing is actually the first projects we've been doing, we've been able to deliver them at a very high quality. Like just like bad news, good news travels fast, right? So you always have to be on your toes. But I think that's what helped us getting those clients all across the world. We get clients from like Australia, and we're like, how did they even end up here? And then we hear that they heard from somebody who worked with us or a partner or something like that, that they were happy with the work we did. So it comes down to the consistency on the quality, I believe. And then also one of the elements that we actually didn't anticipate and that helped us a lot was COVID. In the sense that together with first-party data being an important topic, together with marketing budgets opening up for MarTech licenses and for these specific problems or to challenge these specific problems, COVID happened, which means that all of a sudden everybody needed to work from home. Where in the past consultancy was done on-site or in-country, a lot of these type of things. Now these days remote is kind of a thing, so people don't really care if you're based in Brussels to solve their problems, or if you're in London or in New York or in Asia with them. They don't really care. The only thing they care about is, are you able to deliver at a high quality, and can you help me with the problem that is very urgent for me? So those are type of the things that helped us. And the last part that we really focus on is giving back, or at least trying to help people who have a specific challenge but aren't able to put their finger on it, to help them like get educated on things. One of the first things that people get when they join the organization is a tiny book, it's I think 100 pages or something, called The Go-Giver. And The Go-Giver talks about this principle of giving selflessly, and in the end things will work out in one way or another. It's a bit a naive thing maybe, some people would say.
Super
like,
nice.
Why would you share so much? Why would you give so much of your knowledge away for free? But that's a lot of the things that we're trying to do. We write blog posts on stuff that we've built. We've open sourced a couple of like code lines for problems that we've encountered or bugs that some platforms had, and then we wrote a fix and we just shared it out there to just make sure that people can get educated, can get their problems solved, and if they're stuck at that point, obviously we'll be more than happy to help them out. But the objective is actually to start contributing to the understanding of how can data bring better customer experiences, and how can data actually work in the benefit of the customer.
So am I understanding right that basically in the beginning especially, but you guys basically just built on organic and just the fact that you were doing a good job and you were providing content on how you do these things, and then people just sort of either found you through the content, I guess, inbound, or they just heard about you through the network and stuff? Yeah,
exactly. Like, fun gimmicky story, we shared our very first client because before we were even incorporated as a company. Well, we had an agreement on email because we didn't even have like a VAT number or something to tie it back on. But it's basically an introduction to a partner, and they knew somebody who had a challenge where they thought that we would be able to help them out, knowing that we were building this company. And so in the end, you have these conversations with these people, and you align on the problem, and they take a leap of faith with you by understanding that I trust that you will be able to solve that company. So to solve that problem. So de facto, you need a bit of luck in the beginning. That's what I was talking about. But yeah, the initial deals, we were able to sign them very quickly. We got a bit lucky. We used our network and things worked out. Yeah. And then as soon as we started shipping projects, partners were happy, clients were happy, and things evolved from there.
Yeah, that's I think it's a really smart initiative, and again, I think it's something that you see often in marketing as well, and really with any type of business. I often feel like there's this major fear about sharing too much, and as you said as well, it may be naive to like share all of those things, but I think it's not at all. What I've seen way more companies have success with the fact of like, okay, we are actually sharing stuff that we know, because people, you'll just you know, you'll just build up that image about them that, hey, they know what they're talking about. They can actually, you know, have the right answers to all of our problems or issues or whatever, or this specific problem that we're having around. And I think I rarely see, yeah, you know, people will be always, there always will be people that will either just steal some of your stuff or, you know, reuse some of your stuff. But even then, at the end, it will come down to, are you then actually able to, you know, do a good solution? Are you then actually able to do the job? And just because you're sharing a lot of stuff free, it doesn't mean that you're sharing, you know, your knowledge free. It means that you're basically building up this nice image of yourself, and then people can actually, you know, have a leap of faith, as you said.
Yeah, and I'm also convinced that like it's not because you solve a problem online that you're giving away all of your potential as a business, in the sense that our job is to actually be very good and efficient at tracking use cases and solving problems that people have.
Yeah.
And if you understand that that's the core that you're building for, and that's why we're focusing on processes and that pragmatism and all of the almost boring stuff I shared. But that's kind of what makes that we try to excel, or that we're able to excel at that, which means that if we solve one problem, tomorrow there's going to be another one. So we'll drive business from the next problem that we're solving, because we're in the business of solving problems for customers when it comes to data, business, marketing, and tech. So that's actually the field we're in.
Exactly. And then my one last question, which relates to this, is that I actually seen, so like a year, 1.5 years ago, whatever, I was working with a data analytics company back in Hungary. And they actually started to do a cooperation with DBT, which I'm sure you've heard about. And then you know that DBT is like one of the players that basically got so big with community, and just the fact that they were sharing everything. They were basically doing like open source, and they were always sharing the issues that they were solving and all of that. So I think it connects to this. Like, do you guys build in any sense on community besides the network and stuff? Are you guys trying to build up sort of like a community as well?
I think we're not doing it in a good enough way or in a visible enough way. DBT is a very, very good example. The way we do it is by, I guess, giving back more. We optimize documentation for tools we work with. Like if the documentation is open sourced, our team will go in and like they found a mistake or they think that it's better explained this way, they will try to make a change, commit it, and see if they accept. Those are the type of things. On the other hand, we are, I think, more and more becoming an active part of the analytics community, trying to share. If you're in analytics, by the way, it's one of the most amazing communities. The whole Measure Camp scene is amazing. It's basically over 100 people on a Saturday in a specific city offering up their Saturdays to attend and to give like free sharing courses. They all work in different companies, competitors, clients, everything you can imagine. But that day, the only thing that they're interested about is learning about stuff that others have been able to solve, or sharing stuff to others that they've been able to solve and get opinions on that. So I think that scene is evolving very rapidly. The last 2 years, Measure Camp has been picking up. We're going, if all goes well, we'll be attending 2 more Measure Camps this year.
Nice.
So we're part of a community more than building our own, and we're contributing, I believe, to different communities rather than building our own.
You said there that you're not doing a good enough job, but honestly, based on what you're saying, I think you're doing a pretty amazing job. So if you're doing that and already like giving back a lot and creating all that content, and what you said, I love that. So basically you find these open source solutions and then you see actually this can be done better. I think that's already like much more than a lot of companies do. So kudos to that. I think that's super nice.
Yeah, on the other hand, I'm not sure if all the vendors are happy with that, because our team is also notorious for being a pain in the ass for support. Like making requests that like your documentation is not up to date and I can't change it myself, please do that. I'm not sure if everybody's happy with that. So, but
that's business. But yeah, from your side, even if they're not happy, they're gonna definitely remember you guys. So that's also I think a good approach.
Good or bad.
Yeah. So finally, just one last question is, obviously you're still super young and there's still a lot of career ahead of you, but do you feel like there's one lesson that you've learned along the way so far that you wish you known earlier, or that would have helped if you known it earlier?
There's a couple of things I believe. Like one is choose early in your career, choose people above paychecks. Like it's more important the people you work with and where you end up than the initial paycheck that you get. because you will like good people will help you develop, and if you develop better, then anyways a paycheck will follow one way or another. Another thing is that I've always been imagining myself that other people always knew everything. It's not the case. A lot of people are very good at bluffing. The best people are good at figuring out things, which I think is the best skill you can have, together with curiosity in your life. One thing I wish I didn't do as much is underestimating what you can do. There's a lot of people who will always say like it's not a good idea, it's stupid, you're not going to be able to do that, and at least giving it a try and see how it feels. Not listening as much to other people when you really want to do something. Give it a try. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but again, don't make other people make up your opinion. Use it as input to make up yours. So those are kind of the three things.
I love those, honestly. Just as a close down, I can relate to all three of those so much. The one that I really loved when you said that you feel like other people know everything. I remember as a kid, you see these people, especially in like roles that require you to wear a suit or whatever, and you see these people going to these large buildings, and you're like, one day I'm gonna be a grown up and I'm gonna know stuff. And then even as an intern, I was working at Cartoon Network when I was 18. And dude, people working there for 5-10 years wouldn't make decisions on things. And I would be like, what? Like, I thought you guys know this. And it's just so funny to have that. And I think it also speaks to the expectations. Like, you sort of expect from yourself, because you have that image, you then go into working, and then you go into different position, and you sort of expect yourself to understand everything, just exactly. Initially in the beginning, intentionally sort of. And then after a while, I think that's a really good point that you just learn. It's actually more about curiosity and the idea of like, okay, I actually want to understand these processes rather than knowing everything straight out from the gate. So that's
yeah, exactly. And understanding that curiosity and your willingness to learn actually will allow you to understand things over time. Takes away a lot of the stress, because otherwise you would feel like, why don't I know this? I'm in a meeting and people are talking about something I don't understand.
And I don't understand.
There's a fair chance that people in those meetings actually also have like a limited or not an entire understanding of what they're talking about. So you'll be able to catch up. Don't stress too much.
Exactly. And I think that also connects to the other thing that you said, the money thing. It's like, I think often, especially when you're younger and you're, just sort of in the beginning of the journey, you feel like, I actually need to make more money. But after a while, you actually realize that it's so much more important if you can actually learn from the people that you're working together with, and you actually should be enjoying the stuff that you're doing. Obviously not always, like some days are going to be bad, and some of the stuff that you need to do is not as fun, but it's so much more valuable compared to that X amount of extra money that you can get. So
and I'm also convinced that if you do something that you really like to do, you're gonna excel de facto. So you're gonna grow what you're doing. So the rest will follow.
Exactly. Glenn, thanks a lot for this. I've taken a lot of your time. This was super fun. Thank you for joining me.
It was super fun. Thanks for having me, and see you soon.